Is there life on Mars? There sure is, although I don't mean huge spiders at the centre of gigantic silvery webs or little green men running around. Even the kind of plant-based life that would be visible to NASA rovers and Hubble telescopes is probably not going to be discovered on this red planet anytime soon. That's because to the naked eye, Mars looks like a barren and burned out piece of rock, spinning its lonely course around the sun. But even if they should find life on Mars, of how much value would that discovery really be? Not much compared to the discovery of how to communicate with the extremely powerful being that is its governor, the god of Mars, who will never be found at the end of an outward-facing telescope. Hello, I'm Annie Dieu-Le-Veut, shaman of Avalon, and this is part of a series about how wishing upon a star can really make your dreams come true. Of course, that's a simplistic and poetic way of illustrating the effects of engaging with your own hero's journey to full enlightenment with the help of the gods and goddesses who govern the 7 planets. We have already discussed in previous videos how as human beings we are constantly shadowboxing with those planetary forces, even when we are asleep. So following on from the videos on the sun and on the moon, today's is about the planetary force of Mars and about how that shadowboxing relationship can help us to find our courage and heal our inner shadows and speed our spiritual evolution. You probably know that the shamans of old drew stories in the stars of the night skies to leave us messages about the qualities and characteristics of each of these gods. Those stories have come down to us as myths which all follow the same blueprint of the mythological hero who journeys around the rim of the wheel of the constellations of the zodiac and who gets help from the planetary governors, otherwise known as gods and goddesses, along the way. But these stories were not composed just to benefit those who lived in the past, because in essence, no matter how much technological progress we make, the human condition and what the heart needs to grow never changes. And so today these myths are still being recycled for our benefit in the movie theatres and on Netflix and Disney and Amazon Prime. In fact, all the best rom-coms, the ones that smash box office records anyway, are actually based on the part of the hero's journey, which is the great love story between Venus and Mars. And I've just realised that as I'm putting this video together today, Mars and Venus are happily in conjunction. Anyway, I'm going to be breaking down those hidden meanings as they are found in the Notebook, whose hero is Noah and who starts off his journey as a young, undeveloped Mars in relentless pursuit of a seemingly unattainable and unviable relationship, in the long term anyway, with the beautiful Ali. I'll also be throwing in a few tales from much older heroes to show you how the more things change, the more they stay the same. I'm hoping then that you'll be able to use the Notebook as a Rosetta Stone to help you recognise the traits of Mars and also how to interact with him at the various stages of your journey around the rim of the wheel. So do make yourself comfortable, and while you're at it, would you mind clicking the like button, because that prompts the great God in the cloud algorithm to share this video with more people. Interesting that the author of the original novel of the Notebook, Nicholas Sparks, named his hero Noah. That's because in the oldest known story about a hero, which is about 5,000 years old at least, the hero Gilgamesh is searching for his most ancient ancestor, who had been granted immortality as a boon from the gods for building Noah's Ark. So I love the way these writers so often hint to give a nod to the cognoscenti, although I'm never sure whether it's conscious signalling or if it's just that they're unwittingly dragging up these long-lost motifs that have become imprinted on our race memories or DNA as far as back as anyone can remember. But there is nothing in Spark's biography to tell us that he has any knowledge of mythology or the hero's journey. He has all the same, though, written the perfect Venus and Mars myth for the modern age. Now, I know that the critics were not overly keen on the Notebook, but that's just them. The common folk like us, whose bums on seats these film moguls need to keep their mistresses in fine minks, still have enough wit to recognise and avidly lap up a great magical romantic tale with a narrative that, yes, critics, is formulaic, but in the case of the Notebook, it is the right formula. It is the formula that we long for because it follows all the most well-known and well-loved milestones and landmarks. We never get tired of hearing these sagas because even though to some, like the critics, they're deemed not sophisticated enough, or they're thought to be too cornered and hackneyed, or there's not enough sex, drugs and violence, they are true to the human heart, and the human heart always knows what it wants, and that will never change. We are really on this earth like people with dementia. We need to be reminded all the time of who we truly are, and these kinds of movies do it for us. They give us the fairground ride we want to go on because we know when we get off it at the end, we'll be grinning from ear to ear with happiness again. And speaking actually of fairgrounds, there's at the beginning of the Notebook, right from the get-go, it's like a blaring signal, like a starter's pistol, that we're about to enter that familiar, enchanted tunnel of love. And that is when Noah leaps up onto the Ferris wheel in the fairground on Seabrook Island, and he grabs hold of the rim and hangs from it, but it's really to grab the attention of the stunningly beautiful, wealthy heiress, Ali. I could have cheered at that moment. I immediately recognised it from my vantage point in the cheap seats because that's the wheel rim of old that we know and love. It is the setting off point on the spring equinox when the sun enters Aries, ruled by Mars, and the elemental fire bursts up through the earth in a blazing display of fertile growth. The earliest story about a hero traversing the wheel rim of the constellations, you've probably heard of it. It's called the Epic of Gilgamesh. It's the oldest poem, apparently, and the longest, but don't worry, I'm not going to read it to you all here. But before leaving on his quest from the fairground celebrations of the spring equinox, the Sumerian Gilgamesh announces to the townsfolk, "Listen to me, men of Uruk, the men of Uruk. You know, there would I be strong. I travel the wheel rim." And there it is. That's the original wheel rim of the constellations. In fact, fairgrounds and carnivals, circuses, amusement parks and pleasure gardens always have a kind of starring role at the beginning of these myths. If you'd like to know more about what they mean, I break it all down much further in the chapter on Pinocchio in my book, Stories in the Stars. But for our purposes here, in a nutshell, I will just say that fairgrounds and pleasure gardens and the like represent the seemingly infinite and glittering possibilities of human life that only the fool rushes into, open-armed, only to end up stuck on a never-ending ghost train or caught in the hall of mirrors in a fragmented and false reality. In Pinocchio, he turns into a donkey to be sent to the salt mines. So these are the perilous dangers of the enticingly fairy-lit fairground that traps the neophyte human, who at that point is the fool. It is only the fool that enters into the fray in this way, And this is why the path of the wanderer through the tarot deck begins with the Fool. It is always as a young, brash, arrogant and overbearing clot that the would-be hero of Mars always starts out. Like the young chap Noah in the Notebook, hanging from one arm from the struts of the wheel to impress Ali and get her to agree to a date. It's always the same. This motif is found in all of the myths. For example, we find another synchronicity with Pinocchio, whose name in Tuscany means pineal gland, when we are told that Noah's job is working with wood in a lumberyard. Well, Pinocchio starts off as a wooden puppet. And just like this wooden puppet, Noah's journey from blockhead to real man charts the passage of how an unpromising plank of wood is transformed through the challenges it meets into the philosopher's stone that turns all it touches into gold. And so we're really just at the beginning of Noah's journey here. But as we go on, we realise that this philosopher's stone that turns all it touches into gold, it is actually Neil Young's heart of gold that he's always searching for, although the path of his quest has become recently blocked by a huge black rock. Sorry, I couldn't resist that. Anyway, of course, Jesus and his father were carpenters, as was Pinocchio's dad, Geppetto, by the way, and there's a reason for that. It's not historical, it's alchemical. And so it is that we first meet Noah as he carelessly risks life and limb and jumps onto the wheel, the Ferris wheel in the fairground at the beginning of the summer. He goes on after that to demonstrate many of the characteristics of an immature Mars, brash and overconfident about his abilities to have whatever he wants without having yet had the chance to become worthy of life's rewards. Ali at this stage is completely out of his league. She comes from a wealthy family and with her great beauty is expected to make a good marriage into one of the richest southern families. So Noah practically accosts her in the street. It was a few days after the fair, but he's so desperate. And he runs into her and he's quite pushy and insists she go out with him, telling her that if he wants something, he always just goes for it and he always gets it. Yes, that's young Mars all over. Despite the huge gap in their social standing, which meant much more when the film was set in the 1940s than it does now, Ali is in fact bowled over by the intensity of his ardour, and so she starts going out with him. The love, though, that quickly flames up between them is the elemental fire of Aries. It is very powerful, but raw and untamed. So pretty much during their whole time together, at the beginning of their relationship, their uncontrollable passion manifests in either making out or having a row. I should perhaps say at this stage, now that I've mentioned the elemental fire of Aries, that alchemists recognize 4 kinds of fire. They use the heat of the elemental fire to start up their stoves on the spring equinox. There is also the central fire and the cosmic fire, which need not delay us here, but I will be coming on to the 4th fire, the secret fire, later on when Noah has travelled much further round the wheel rim to reach the part that's where the sun is going through Scorpio. But right now in the story, we are still in spring and the sun is passing through Aries. And so the raw Martian fire between them is still too elemental. It is yet to be alchemically refined into the sword or javelin of the secret fire that leads to the birth of the philosopher's stone. Noah's romancing of Ali in the old broken down derelict house of the Windsor plantation is really hot, and made all the more so because they are just fumbling their way to the ultimate conjunction without either of them having much of a clue about what they're doing. It's not clear at this stage whether he's a virgin, but she certainly is. they're just doing their best. But it is here that Noah tells Ali that one day he's going to buy that old mansion and restore it to its former glory. Which is odd, because there is nothing in his future at that stage that would indicate how on earth he could ever achieve such a feat. Just as there is nothing in his future at that stage to indicate how he, as a poor and humble lumberman, could ever win the hand of such a great and illustrious Venusian beauty as Ali. Her parents, of course, realise the impossibility of the match and worry about the heartache that the inevitable split will cause their daughter when she has to leave Seabrook Island at the end of the summer and take up her place in college in New York. The father tries to reassure the mother. "Don't worry, dear, it's just a summer romance." And so it turned out to be, although not without some major interference from her parents, which caused a massive row between Noah and Ali and which led to their inevitable breakup. I am reminded in this first part of the notebook of when Gilgamesh first meets Ishtar at Taurus. Ishtar is a much earlier version of Venus, and Venus governs Taurus. Ishtar offers herself to Gilgamesh and he's attracted to her, but he can't quite compute it all in his underdeveloped brain. Whereupon his best mate and wingman, Enkidu, manages to kill Ishtar's brother-in-law, the Bull of Heaven. Then when she protests, Gilgamesh roundly insults her, which doesn't go down too well. As a punishment, the sun god sees to it that Enkidu dies slowly and painfully of a fatal disease. And so in the notebook we see a similar motif when the action enters World War II. Noah has been separated from Ali for more than a year when he enlists, along with his best mate Finn, and they spend 2 years together under Rommel fighting in the North African desert. From there, they are transferred to the theatre of war in Europe, and they are still together on that battlefield when Finn is blown up and dies horribly of his wounds. In the hero's journey, it's so often the death of the closest friend that provides the catalyst for deeper growth through all the metanoia. It is such agonizing, almost unbearable pain, alternately dissolving into gut-wrenching grief and then wailing and raging and fist-shaking at the gods, that it cuts deep into the heart of the hero. We see all this very clearly in the epic of Gilgamesh. And in both of those cases, the tragedy always takes place when he's reached the part of the wheel rim that's at Cancer, which is governed by the mistress of the tides and tears of man, the moon. It brings our hero up sharp, enough anyway to slow him down and to re-examine his life and to start to ask the right questions that will eventually open up to him the treasure caves of greater wisdom. Yes, that hoard of gold is guarded by a dragon, but that is just another symbol for the one whose role it is to provide the hero with his challenges so that he can transform from a piece of rock into the philosopher's stone. We don't see the metanoia stage of Noah in this, and the next time we see him, he's returning home after the war, happily in one piece, to find that his father has sold the old family home so they could use the money to buy the derelict ramshackle mansion on the Windsor plantation and restore it to its former glory. Once again, this is a familiar motif. A father or other older relative often appears when the hero reaches the Leo stage of the wheel's rim, after the metanoia of Cancer has given him enough pause to grow and realise that he needs to settle down and listen to his wiser elders if he's going to make anything of his life at all. There is in fact a Welsh version of this Venus and Mars love story called How Kilhwch Won Olwen, and it is another similar tale of star-crossed lovers from different social standings and therefore a seemingly impossible quest to reach the conjunction. In that Mabinogian myth, it is Arthur, yes, the Arthur, who as Kilhwch's older cousin comes to his aid in his suit of Olwen when our hero reaches the point on the wheel rim where the sun is passing through Leo. But back to the notebook. Noah knew instinctively when he first told Ali, back during that heady summer of love of their youth, that he was going to restore that mansion, even though he didn't then know how. Now his achievements around the wheel rim have magnetized that previously unachievable situation into his life, bringing him the means to rebuild it and to make it a worthy home or nest for the great love of one who is in effect, to him anyway, the embodiment on earth of Venus. The rebuilding of the mansion is a very obvious metaphor for those who have the eyes to see. Jungian psychologists always say that if you have a dream about a part of your house that needs fixing, it is usually meant to indicate a part of your life that needs attention. And this is found also in the Japanese practice of Feng Shui. But it is the perfect material for the lumberman who found such a great use for all that wood to create a structure so beautiful and so lasting, as he does manage to achieve in the end. In other words, in the process of rebuilding that mansion, Noah is rebuilding his whole life from the inside out, and it is with the hope that that life will attract back to him his love, his great love, Ali. It is his dedication to her and their great love. But it is slow, grinding, meticulous work that requires great patience and attention to detail. And this is the challenge the hero meets at Virgo always. This is where he learns the value of putting in effort to create a worthwhile legacy on Earth. And we just find this same motif in all the myths at exactly this stage. For example, when the Welsh killhook reaches Virgo, he has to complete 39 impossible tasks set by Owen's father, the ogre who rules the land. And there is no way he could have achieved a single one of them without the help of his older cousin, Arthur. And I won't go into too much detail now about what happens next in the notebook, because I don't want to spoil it for you if you haven't already watched it. And if you haven't watched it, I really recommend that you do see it. But I'm going to fast forward for a bit to where that screenplay really scores big time with me as the perfect modern day myth, in that it doesn't just end with the couple just going off into a rosy sunset to live happily ever after, as so many of them do, because there is still further to go along the rim of the wheel. And although the mythological hero always meets the love of his life again at the autumn equinox in the sign of Libra, which is ruled by Venus, there is still further to go. But it is here that at Libra, ruled by Venus, that he gets a second chance. And the idea is that the lessons he's learned on his journey around the wheel render him a much more suitable partner for her. And so this is where most movies usually end, and this is the happy ending. But not in the notebook. Our hero goes from Libra into the darker travails of Scorpio, just as the mythological hero always does. During the last years of his life, Noah has to face some extremely painful but unavoidable challenges through his love for Ali, and he has to find courage and strength to endure what is in effect a kind of torture. But it is here too, from Mars at Scorpio, that his efforts could win him the boon of the secret fire, which will help him meet all his foes. And he will need it, because next he comes to Sagittarius, where he tumbles down into the underworld to face his greatest trials, which, if he passes, will result in his death and rebirth at Capricorn. And so this is the role of Mars in all our lives, to take us from the elemental fire raging out of control at the beginning of our fool's journey to the more refined secret fire, which is what will turn us from wooden blocks into philosopher's stones. Well, that's the idea anyway. This secret fire was symbolized by alchemists as a sword or lance or javelin or arrows, all very Mars-like symbols. In fact, the astrological symbol of Mars has a circle with an arrow going upwards. But it is Luke Skywalker's lightsaber. It is the sword Excalibur that Arthur pulls from the stone. It is the sword Fragarac that is wielded by the Celtic heroes in my series of books, the Glastonbury Chronicles. That is why Mars is the guardian spirit of the true warrior, the spiritual warrior, maybe the war shaman like Geronimo who led the Apaches. There is always a role for the war shaman, and it's nowadays the war shaman is in an information war and it's a lot trickier. But the alchemist Panetti knew of this secret fire and he wonders about it, and here he writes, "The fire of the sun could not be this secret fire because it is unequal and does not penetrate. The fire of our stoves, which consume the constituent parts of matter, could not be the one. The central fire, which is innate in matter, could not be that secret fire so much praised, because this heat is very different within the three kingdoms. The animal possesses it in much higher degree than the plant." And so he's telling us a lot about what it isn't. But it takes actually Franz Hartmann, who is a 19th century German physicist, to identify what it actually is in his book Alchemy. And he writes that it's a serpentine working power in the body of the ascetic. It is an electric, fiery, hidden power and electro-spiritual force and creative power. You'll find this gift of Mars when you reach the point on the rim of the wheel where the sun is passing through Scorpio. And you'll find that it is so powerful that you may never have to use it, because your enemy will see this sword, if only subconsciously, glinting menacingly beneath your cloak, and it will be enough for him to turn tail and run. So I hope you find it to be the perfect tool for your own toolkit once you've reached this part of your own notebook story. Mars can grant you that boon. It is within his gift and only within his gift. But he needs to be asked. His day is Tuesday and his advice centre is open at dawn on that day. And so I just finally want to say, some of you may be a little uncomfortable with the idea of your life as a story in a notebook, as if somehow it decreases from its value. Or you may believe that every facet of it is literally true, to the point that fact checkers would basically be very happy to verify every single second of it. So in that case, can I introduce you to the idea of recommissioning? Because it's not that you're wrong, it's just that there's a reframing that takes place. Recommissioning means resetting the mission or fine-tuning its trajectory. And it is what we are able to do at various stages of our journey around the rim of the wheel, as we hone our judgment through accruing more wisdom and eventually more compassion, which changes our view of the past. These gifts are often hard won, but they are vital in helping us to understand better the events we lived through in the past and which led us to where we are now. So we no longer have this kind of trigger reaction whenever we think of them, and that lead us into making mistakes. In other words, what we think happened to us at 8 years old wasn't what really happened, or at least, at best, the memory of it is only a fragment, a partial rendering of the whole, which with the development of wisdom and perhaps some shamanic healing like soul retrieval should eventually bring us healing, if only in our dreams. So I hope that makes sense to you. And to conclude, I hope now that you see that the stories of all heroes, from Gilgamesh, Noah, Killhook, Pinocchio, to the one of you and me, is the story of a recommissioning and a remembering which transforms even the most unpromising wooden puppet actor into a wise and compassionate superstar who turns all he or she touches into gold. You've been listening to me, Annie Dieu-Le-Veut. All my books are on Amazon, and if you'd like to support my work, I'm on Patreon as Shaman of Avalon.